Hey,
Morning.
how are you? How are we doing?
Hanging in there.
Good, good, good. When was your surgery?
Tuesday.
All right, good for you. Well, if you reach a point where you need to get up,
Thank you.
you know, you change your position or whatever, let me know.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
We'll take care of you. And I told them to move it along if you can, if they can. I'm not sure they know how to do that. All right, we're in session. Just the defendant's present and the attorneys are present. I spent 20 minutes or so in chambers this morning with the attorneys trying to kind of get some things straight from a logistical standpoint in terms of the evidence for today. We may still have to have a hearing out of the presence of the jury at some point, but I think right now we're ready to go. And we've in my discretion, I've allowed Courtney Lask to finish her testimony on Monday. And so we'll bring her back and finish the direct and the cross on Monday. Tell me who's on the witness stand now.
No, this is Danan.
Okay. And she's had knee surgery?
Hip.
Hip surgery, okay. On Tuesday. Okay. All right. Sheriff, ask you to come in, please. Morning, folks. Apologize for the delay in getting in here. I met with the attorneys in chambers for sometime this morning, and to just kind of logistically figure out the best way to deal with the evidence today. There are some legal issues with regard to some of the witnesses that are coming in, and I'm trying to avoid having to have some kind of lengthy hearing before you hear the testimony. I've allowed Courtney Lask, who was here yesterday evening, to finish her testimony on Monday, and so we're going to bring her back Monday and finish the direct and the cross-examination of Ms. Lask. The next witness to be called by the state is Mackenzie Danan, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Who's on the witness stand right now. Ms. Danan apparently had hip surgery on Tuesday, and so we appreciate her being here, and she may need a break before you do. She may have to get up, move around, or do something to change her position, so just kind of be aware of that, and we'll deal with that as we hear her testimony. Sheriff, can you get to the Bible? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Don't stand up. Just remain seated. Okay.
These psalms of testimony you give us for will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank
Thank you. Okay.
Thank
Who will be examining her? Okay, Ms. Holt?
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you state your name, please?
Mackenzie Dahan, Dehaan.
And how are you employed?
I'm currently employed as a forensic scientist with the North Carolina State Crime Laboratory here in Raleigh. I am assigned to the forensic biology section.
And what do you do as an analyst with the forensic biology section?
In the forensic biology section, I serve a dual role. I am a body fluid identification analyst. In that role, I examine pieces of evidence that come in to the laboratory for the presence of body fluids, such as blood, semen, or saliva. I then prepare those samples to go on for further testing if necessary, prepare a report, and testify in court. In addition, I am also a DNA analyst, where I perform DNA analysis on questioned and known samples submitted in a case, develop genetic profiles, compare those profiles to see if there are any matches or non-matches, prepare reports, and testify in court.
In this particular case, did you operate in your function as a body fluid identification analyst?
I did.
And is it typical in the state crime lab for there to be basically two steps with regard to a DNA analysis? That is, that it comes through a body fluid identification analyst and then goes on to a DNA analyst?
Yes, that's the norm. The norm in the crime lab is to go through both a body fluid identification analyst and then go to a DNA analyst. Sometimes those are the same person, sometimes they're different people.
And in this particular case, is there any reason that you yourself didn't do the DNA analysis?
I believe there was a bone sample submitted as a standard. I was not trained at that time to process bone for DNA, so all of the samples went on to an additional person.
And with regard to your training experience, specifically in the area of body fluid analysis and identification, can you describe that for the jury?
Yes, ma'am. I have a Bachelor's of Science degree in chemistry as well as a Bachelor's of Science in biology. I then went on to obtain my Master's of Science in microbiology from the University of Tennessee. Upon completion of my master's, I was employed by the State Crime Lab. I completed an in-house training program in the field of body fluid identification. This consisted of both written and practical examinations, lectures, readings. It culminated in a competency test, which I had to pass with 100% accuracy. In addition, I take a proficiency test that's provided by an external provider annually in order to maintain my proficiency and continue to work cases. Annually, we attend training, either put on by outside vendors or other forensic groups, in order to further our knowledge and stay current with techniques.
And have you had the opportunity to testify, excuse me, before as an expert in body fluid analysis?
Yes, ma'am.
And how many times have you done that?
As a forensic biologist, it's been about 95 times.
Now, at this time, the state would tender Agent Dahan to the court as an expert in forensic biology, and specifically in body fluid identification.
Very well. The court accepts the tender. You may proceed.
Agent Dahan, with regard to the case in which Laura Ackerson is listed as a victim, did you receive certain items of evidence on September the 13th of 2011?
I did.
And how were they received? How did you receive them?
They would be transferred from my evidence technician in the crime laboratory to myself. Each item would be in a sealed condition when transferred between people.
And so when law enforcement has items that they submitted to the state crime lab for analysis and further testing, they actually turn it over to an evidence custodian who then keeps it secure until it's turned over to you or other analysts there?
Yes, ma'am.
Could you describe for the jury, if you would, what items that you received on September the 13th of 2011 regarding this case?
Yes, ma'am. I received 3 items labeled as DNA swabbing, a white bath towel, a 3M disposable respirator, a rose in color bath cloth, 4 latex gloves and a 3M disposable respirator, yellow dish gloves, carpet pad from under the dining room carpet, carpet pad from under the hallway carpet, swab from the linen closet frame, door frame, 3 samples of water from the P-trap, a swab sample from a mattress pad, and an additional sample of water from the P-trap.
And once you received all of those items, did you undertake to perform some analysis on those items?
Yes, ma'am.
And specifically, what was requested of you with regard to these items that were submitted?
What I was asked for examined for was blood.
And can you describe the process you go through in examining an item for the presence of blood?
The first thing I do is a visual examination. I'm looking at the items submitted for any stained areas that could be consistent with staining from blood. I would then do an examination that would give me a chemical indication on whether or not blood is present. If that is a positive result, then I would take a small cutting or swabbing, depending on the type of item submitted, in order for that sample to go on further for DNA analysis.
And so if you get a particular item and you're asked to examine it for blood, if the result is negative, does that kind of end the inquiry in terms of passing that item on for any further analysis?
If it was for blood, yes, ma'am.
And you've indicated you've been trained, DNA is contained in blood, is that correct?
Yes.
You had indicated that you received a white bath cloth or bath towel to examine as one of the items.
Yes, ma'am.
And can you describe what you found with regard to that white bath towel or cloth?
Yes, it was lightly stained, the white towel. It did give areas that were chemical indication for the presence of blood, so I took a cutting from those areas to send on for further analysis.
And what kind of testing are you doing at this point that results in chemical indications for the presence of blood?
It's a screening color indication test.
And this jury's previously heard about phenolphthalein. Is that what you were using in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
Remy, approach the witness.
All right.
Agent Danan, I'm handing you what has previously been introduced into evidence that states Exhibit 436 and has been identified as a white towel that was recovered from the trash at a particular location. Is this the item that you received?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
And are you able to tell that by markings and identifiers that you placed on the bag containing that item?
Both the bag that contains the item as well as the item itself bears the unique crime lab number that this case was assigned, as well as the item number that the towel was assigned when it came into the laboratory. It also bears my initials and the date.
And that's the item from which you took some cuttings to turn over to the DNA analyst in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
And was that Agent Hinton?
Yes.
In this case? May I approach again?
All right.
Agent Danan, I'm handing you what has been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 482, which is, do you recognize that?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is State's Exhibit 482?
State's Exhibit 482 is a plastic bag containing the sealed manila envelope that I prepared in this case. It contains the cuttings that I took from the towel to go on for DNA analysis.
And again, are you able to recognize that by markings that you placed on that exhibit?
Yes, the envelope has the state crime lab number, the item number, my initials, and the date, as well as a short description.
And does it appear in the same condition as when you packaged it and sent it to Agent Hinton for further DNA analysis?
It's been opened several other times, but other than that, yes.
Now, at this time, the state would move to introduce into evidence State Exhibit 482.
Let me receive.
And Agent Danan, you indicated that the cuttings that you took from the white towel, and which are in 482, were the areas that tested positive for blood or gave chemical indications for blood.
They gave chemical indications, yes, ma'am.
Agent Danan, you indicated earlier that you had received, as part of this initial submission, in this case, DNA swabbings, which have previously been introduced into evidence and been described as being taken from the victim's car in this case, which I believe are labeled as your items 1, 2, and 3.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you undertake yourself to do any analysis with regard to those swabs?
No, I did not.
And what did you do with those swabs?
Those swabs were sent in as a touch sample or a sample for skin cells only to be tested for DNA. Since there was not any body fluid to be identified on those, I did not do any testing. Those went straight to the DNA analyst.
And is that sometimes referred to as touch DNA when you're trying to get DNA from skin cells?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you also receive what's described as a 3M disposable respirator that has previously been identified as coming from the trash in this case? Did you receive an item such as that?
I received 2 items.
Okay. Item number 5 on your report, is that an individual 3M respirator?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you perform any analysis with regard to that item?
No, again, you would be looking at who the wearer of that item was, so you'd be looking for skin cells. There's no screening test, so that would go straight to DNA analysis.
Did you receive a rose in color bath towel at this initial submission?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you conduct any testing with regard to that rose in color bath towel?
I did.
And can you describe what testing you performed?
I again did a visual examination of the bath towel. I then performed general rubbings, which means I tested the towel in its entirety because I did not see any stains present, and those rubbings were negative for the presence of blood.
You may.
Agent Danan, this is what's been previously admitted into evidence, State's Exhibit 435, and it's been described as a rose and color bath towel recovered from the trash in this case. Is that the item that you examined?
Yes, ma'am. The bag contains the lab number, the item number, as well as my initials and date as being the rose and colored towel.
And does that towel appear to have bleach stains on it?
That's what I would characterize them as, yes.
And with regard to the use of bleach, specifically with regard to body fluid analysis, does that impact your ability to recover body fluids?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you describe that for the jury?
Bleach can remove body fluids either through a physical process by it washing off the body fluid or by the chemical process of it being bleach. It will actually chemically remove the body fluid and any DNA that was present.
And as part of this initial submission, again, did you receive an item which was described as being 4 latex glove and another 3M disposable respirator?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you describe what you did with that item?
Those were also sent straight to the DNA analyst at that time for testing for skin cell or touch. And
at some later date, were you called by Agent Hinton specifically with regard to that piece of evidence?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
So when you initially sent it to Agent Hinton, did you even open up that packaging?
No.
And it was described as the respirator and gloves?
Yes.
And describe what happened after you got the call from Agent Hinton.
Agent Hinton called me when she opened the evidence to do her DNA analysis on it and said that there was some staining on the gloves. Could I come and examine the gloves to see if they gave the chemical indications for the presence of blood? So that's what I did. I went over and visually examined the gloves and then performed the screening test for indications of blood, and those gloves did give chemical indications for the presence of blood.
Madam Mayor, Pro Tem Witness.
You may.
Agent Danan, I'm handing you what has previously been introduced into evidence, State's Exhibit 434, and ask if you recognize that item.
State's Exhibit 434 is a now open brown paper bag identified as our lab item 7, which would be the 3M respirator and the 4 gloves that I examined.
And can you pull out those gloves? And when you went, after Agent Hinton called you over there and examined the gloves, you indicated that there was some staining present?
Yes, ma'am.
And where was the staining present?
The staining present was on multiple areas of the gloves, and I tested some of those areas.
And so the testing that you did with regard to those 4 blue latex gloves involved testing the apparent staining on the outside of those gloves?
Yes, ma'am.
And that was positive or gave chemical indications for the presence of blood?
Yes, ma'am.
And they appear at this point to be attached all together. Is that how they were when you saw them?
Yes, Agent Hinton had stapled them together so that they could be identified.
Okay. Did you do any further testing on those gloves, those blue latex gloves, after Agent Hinton had asked you to come and test them for chemical indications of pregnancy?
No, ma'am.
And with regard to the 3M respirator that was also in that bag or part of that, there wasn't any staining or any testing that you did on that?
I never viewed that. Agent Hinton asked me to come do the gloves.
Okay. Did you also receive what was it being identified as yellow dish gloves?
Yes.
And did you conduct any examination with regard to the yellow dish gloves?
No, the yellow dish gloves were also for touch DNA, so they were sent directly over to Agent Hinton.
And you didn't receive a call with regard to staining on those gloves by Agent Hinton?
No, I did not.
Did you receive the carpet pad, or what was identified as being the carpet pad from under the dining room carpet?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you conduct any analysis with regard to that carpet padding?
Yes, I did.
And describe, if you would, the analysis that you did with regard to that.
I first did a visual examination. There was a discolored area present, so I tested both that discolored area and also I did a general rubbing of the entire cutting that was submitted. Both of those were negative. They failed to give indications for the presence of blood.
And the jury's had an opportunity to see that carpet padding and the large area of discoloration. And you've indicated that the visual examination is just kind of the first step in your procedure.
Yes, ma'am.
And had this area been, bleach been poured on that area, would you expect that to hamper or impair your ability to get any indications for blood?
Yes, bleach would interfere with my testing as well as any DNA testing.
Did you also receive padding that was identified as coming from underneath the carpet in the hallway?
Yes.
And with regard to that carpet padding, did you note any staining to that?
I did, and so I performed the same type of testing, tested the stained area, and then additionally tested the cutting in its entirety to see if there were any indications, and there were not.
Did you also receive what was identified as a swab from the linen closet door frame?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you perform any testing on that item?
I did. I, again, screened it for the presence of blood. Simply rubbing of the swab did not give me a reaction. I took a small cutting from the tip of that swab and performed the testing on the tip cutting that I took, and that did give a positive reaction for chemical indications for the presence of blood.
Madam Mayor, first witness.
You may.
Agent Danan, I'm handing you what has previously been introduced as State's Exhibit 470, and which has been identified as a swab from the linen closet door frame. And do you recognize that as the swab that you conducted your testing on?
I do. The envelope for State's Exhibit 470 bears the unique laboratory number, item number, my initials, and date for being the swab from the door frame.
And once you got a positive reaction for chemical indications for the presence of blood, what did you do with that, that swab?
That was resealed in its original packaging and transferred on for DNA analysis.
You had also indicated that you received some glass vials containing liquid.
Yes, ma'am.
And it was identified as being water from the P-trap in this residence.
Yes.
Did you undertake to conduct any analysis of those vials containing that water?
No, ma'am.
And why not?
That's not something we would routinely analyze in the laboratory. Getting water from the P-trap, the water constantly moves through, so trying to narrow that down as for when or where it came from would be impossible.
And as far as the actual testing of water for the presence of blood, is that possible with the chemicals that you have or that you perform there in the State Crime Lab?
Not in the not while they're in the water form, no.
Okay. And what, if you get something that's liquid, what do you typically have to do to be able to conduct any testing on it?
We would have to dry down the sample and then place it onto a swab or another type of material, and then do the testing from there.
And I believe you indicated earlier that that test is not one that you perform, and you've indicated if water is continuing flowing through pipes, that would be difficult to kind of isolate the water that may be relevant, even if you could do that kind of testing.
Correct.
Agent Danan, is that pretty much the items that you received on that first submission related to this case?
Yes, ma'am.
And on April the 4th of 2013, did you receive some additional items?
Yes.
And were these items, were they identified to you as having been recovered from Texas?
They were, yes.
And what items did you receive at that time?
I received a gray towel, a green towel, 5 pieces of a gray t-shirt, a swabbing of possible tissue sample, 2 swabbings from a 75 quart cooler, 3 swabbings from a 120 quart cooler, swabbings from a chain in the boat, swabbing from the coffee can in boat, 2 swabbings from boat oar number 1, 2 swabbings from boat oar number 2, 6 swabbings from the U-Haul trailer, 3 swabbings from the machete, and 17 swabbings from the boat.
And in terms of your testing of those items, can you describe what items you performed tests on and the results?
Each of those items was tested for indications to see whether or not they gave indications for the presence of blood. I went about with the same process as I've previously described, doing a visual examination, looking at the evidence, and then performing the chemical indication test.
With regard to the coffee can?
The coffee can is the only item out of all of those that gave indication for the presence of blood. The remainder of the items, when tested, failed to reveal indications for the presence of blood.
And with regard to the type of testing that you perform, are you able to distinguish, and by the testing you perform, I'm talking now about the chemical indications for the presence of blood.
Why wait for an air conditioning emergency?
Distinguish between animal blood and human blood?
Not with that testing, no.
Okay. Is that something that the DNA testing would need to be done?
It could. We do have a additional test we can perform in the body fluid identification unit that would discern whether it was human or animal. However, that does consume samples, so if there is not a large amount of sample present, we don't go on and do that test. We send it straight to DNA because that can show whether or not it was human, plus give identity if they get a result.
And did you do this in that? Did you do that in this case?
I send it straight to DNA.
With regard to, and just to make clear, with regard to the swabbing of the possible tissue sample, did you perform, and that's previously been identified as coming from a wire fencing area from Texas, did you perform any testing with regard to that swabbing?
I did. I tested it to see if it would give any indications for the presence of blood, and it did not.
And was that sent on for any further testing?
Yes, since it was a possible tissue sample, it was sent on to see if a DNA profile could be generated from it.
And so with regard to the gray towel and the green towel that have previously been identified as coming from the washing machine area in the barn in Texas, no blood?
Correct.
And with regard to the swabbings from the coolers, both the 75-quart cooler and the 120-quart cooler, they were negative for chemical indications for the presence of blood.
That's correct.
And you received 17 swabbings from the boat itself, is that correct? Or which were identified from the boat itself?
From the boat itself, yes.
And none of those gave any indications for the presence of blood?
That's correct.
Did you also receive swabbings from the U-Haul trailer?
I did.
And were they negative for the presence of blood?
They were.
And swabbings from oars from the boat and the chain in the boat?
Yes, ma'am.
And were they, those three also negative for the presence of blood?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you also receive swabbing from a machete?
I did.
And did that give any indications for the presence of blood?
No, it did not.
With regard to the swabbings that were presented to you related to particularly the boat and the U-Haul trailer and the various items that we've just discussed, can you describe the condition of the swabbings or any notes that you made with regard to those?
The swabbings came in identified as reacting with Blue Star, which is an additional screening test that's used in the field mostly. It's a screening test for the presence of blood for very low levels. All of the swabs that I received were very dirty or black in color. They were not typical white swabs with staining on the end. They were very dirty and black or grayish in color.
And did that play any role or have any significance to you in trying to perform your testing?
As far as my testing, if I was going to see an indication, I would still see it if it was positive, but that did make me question, could this have been treated with other chemicals prior to being collected and sent in for me?
And is that important in your analysis with regard to trying to recover body fluids?
It can be.
And how so?
If an area is treated and tested with other things prior to collecting it for DNA, that processing could remove what I'm looking for in the examination process.
And with regard to, you indicated that you received a gray T-shirt or pieces of a gray T-shirt?
Yes, 5 pieces of a gray T-shirt.
And did you do any analysis with regard to those items?
Yes, ma'am.
And what were your results?
That the 5 pieces failed to reveal chemical indications for the presence of blood.
And did you send any of that item or those pieces on for DNA analysis?
I did. One of those pieces I sent on for DNA analysis. It had a staining on it that could have been either tissue type material or possibly from vomit. So I sent those on, that one piece on, to see if any DNA profile could be developed from it.
I think just before we move on, that you also received a vacuum cleaner to examine.
Yes, ma'am.
And before we move to that, I think that there was one additional item that was recovered from the apartment, being a swab from a mattress pad, which you have listed as your item number 16. I think I neglected to ask you about that.
Yes, ma'am. That was in the first submission.
And is that, what was your results of your analysis of that particular swab?
The swab from the mattress pad failed to reveal chemical indications for the presence of blood.
With regard to the vacuum cleaner, can you describe the vacuum cleaner that you received and what you were asked to do with regard to the vacuum cleaner?
The vacuum cleaner that I received was identified as collected from the dumpster. It was a yellow in color vacuum cleaner that had an outside external hose, like one you would use with your attachments. I was asked to examine to see if there was the presence of any blood. So I examined both the outside and the rollers on the bottom, as well as I sliced open the tube and examined inside the tube, as well as inside the catch compartment where the vacuumed up contents would go for disposal.
When you say you examined, perform any tests?
Yes, I did examination for chemical indications for the presence of blood.
And what was the result of that?
That neither the vacuum nor the hose or components gave indications for the presence of blood.
And this was, or was this the yellow vacuum cleaner that had been identified as coming from the trash?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And with regard to the condition of that vacuum cleaner, did you know anything in particular?
It was dirty, and some of the stains that were on the outside were more sticky, tacky, like it was something like dried soda or something to that effect on the outside. It had a sticky texture to it.
And the hose, did it appear to be kind of sticky as well inside of the hose?
Yeah, the hose inside of it was gummy and sticky on the inside of the hose.
And did you specifically test those areas, that gummy and sticky area, as well as other areas?
Yes, ma'am.
And that was negative for blood?
Yes.
Did you also take a DNA sample from the handle of the vacuum cleaner?
I did. I swabbed the handle of the vacuum cleaner where you would hold it to use it to go on for DNA testing.
May I first question?
You may.
Agent Danan, I'm handing you what has previously been introduced into evidence, State's Exhibit A-185. Is that the tissue sample that was recovered from the fence that you sent on for, that you analyzed yourself and then sent on for further DNA analysis?
Yes, it is.
No, that's all I have this time.
Okay. Questions?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Good morning, Ms. Allen.
Good morning.
Let me, if I may, you got pieces of evidence in 2 different deliveries. Is that right?
I believe it was more than 2, but it was at least 2, yes, sir.
Let me go down the list on the first group of items that you received that included the
I'm sorry. They're having a hard time hearing you. The jury's having a hard time hearing you, please. Okay.
I'll speak up.
Okay, please do.
Let me move up a little bit, make sure that everybody can hear me.
Well, speak up and move up and speak up, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. The first item that you talked about examining in that first group of items was the white towel that had been found in the trash container. Correct?
Yes, I examined the white towel that was submitted.
And what you did, you tested that with luminol, am I correct?
No, sir.
What did you test it with?
Kasselmeyer, which is a screening test. Phenolphthalein might also be what you've been heard.
Did it test positive using the screening test?
Yes, some of the areas did, and those were the areas I cut and sent on for further testing.
Tell me how that particular test works as compared to luminol.
With luminol, it's a liquid solution, and you spray it on the item that you're examining. You have to do it in a completely dark room, and you are looking for a luminescence. You're looking for a glow. That glow would give you an indication that there might be something that you need to test further. With the testing I do, the screening test is the Kasselmeyer test. It's a multi-step test. I examine the item. The areas I'm going to test further, I would rub with a piece of filter paper. I would then add 3 chemicals to the filter paper and look for a color change. If there's a color change from clear to pink, that is a positive reaction, that there's a chemical indication for the presence of blood.
And that is also a preliminary test, is it not?
Yes.
That's not a confirmatory test.
No, sir.
You did not perform a confirmatory test.
No, I did not.
And the reason for that was that the spot that you observed was so small that you didn't want to destroy it by attempting to apply phenolphthalein to it. Am I correct?
No, you are not.
Oh, not. Okay. Tell me what you did.
The confirmatory test is a completely separate test from the phenolphthalein or the Kasselmeyer test. The Kasselmeyer test is done separately. We do not add the chemicals to the item itself. If I was going to do the confirmatory test, I would have to take a cutting from and perform that test. The samples were small. They were going on for DNA analysis so that I would not consume anything that then would lead us to not be able to get a DNA profile. We send them directly to DNA to be tested.
So based on the test that you performed, you cannot conclude that the sample was blood, correct?
No, sir. It gave indications for the presence of blood.
And what you do, instead of risking destroying the sample, you pass it on for DNA analysis?
Yes.
Okay. And would that have gone to Agent Hinton for that DNA analysis?
Yes, sir.
Now, I see that you've received a number of other items that did not test positive when you did that preliminary test, correct?
Yes, sir. There were other items submitted in that submission that did not give indications.
There was a 3M disposable respirator, correct?
I did not test that.
The rose-colored towel, correct?
Correct. That was negative.
And that was negative. Did you say that was
yes,
negative? Sir. Now, the 4 latex gloves, did you initially test those for the presence of blood?
No, those were initially, since they were submitted for touch DNA, I did not test them. Those were what I went over and tested at a later date.
And that was after you had already submitted those gloves to Agent Hinton for DNA analysis.
Yes, sir.
And when they came back to you, did you do that preliminary test?
I went over to her office, but yes, I did the same preliminary testing on those.
And what was the result of the preliminary test?
That they gave chemical indications for the presence of blood.
And you did not do the confirmatory test?
No.
The two.
Hang on a minute. You need to,
I'm okay.
are
I
you?
just need to stand for a second.
All right, just do what you need to do.
No, I'm okay.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I don't mean to tell Your Honor, you can walk around.
All right.
You have to ask him.
It's okay.
You okay?
Yes, sir.
Both of the carpet pads failed to indicate the presence of blood.
Correct.
The swabbing from the linen closet was similar to what you talked about when you took the sample from the towel. Am I correct?
The swabbing from the linen closet did give indications for the presence of blood, yes.
And that was a preliminary test, was it not?
Yes, sir.
You did not do the presumptive test to determine whether it really was or was not blood.
I did a presumptive test. I did not do a confirmatory test.
And you passed it on for DNA analysis.
Yes.
And then there was a problem. You didn't have the ability to test the water that was obtained from the P-trap.
Correct.
So of all of the items that were submitted to you during that first delivery, you had 2 items that tested positive using the preliminary test, but nothing that tested positive using the confirmatory test.
I did not perform a confirmatory test, so I don't know what the results would have been.
Okay, so we were talking about 2 items that were forwarded on for DNA analysis.
Along with other items.
One of those items was the sample that had been taken from the mattress pad. Am I correct?
No, the mattress pad failed to reveal chemical indications, and it was returned to the investigating agency.
As well as the yellow vacuum cleaner. It contained no evidence of blood, did it?
Correct. The vacuum cleaner, I swabbed the handle. The swabbing from the handle went on for DNA testing. The vacuum cleaner itself was returned to the investigating agency.
Were there other items that were submitted to you during that first delivery that we have not talked about that you examined?
I examined both towels, the white and the rose in color, the carpet pad, 2 items of carpet pad, the sample from the mattress pad, and the swab from the linen closet door frame. And then the gloves at a second occasion, but they were on the first submission.
Okay. During that first submission, were you given a white shirt that was dirty and moldy?
No, sir.
Were you given a pair of men's underwear that were dirty?
No, sir.
Were you given a pair of men's leather sandals?
No, sir.
Have you ever been given those items to test for the presence of blood?
No, I've not looked at a pair of shoes, a pair of underwear, or a white shirt. No.
Are you aware of any other items that were retrieved from the trash container that were submitted to you to test for the presence of blood?
I only tested the items I've talked about. If other things were collected, I'm unaware.
Now, during the second, I apologize. I'm trying to keep my voice up, but we've done a lot of talking this week. in that second submission, those were items that came from Texas, correct?
The second submission I received, yes, sir.
And you found using a preliminary test, you found only one item that indicated the possible presence of blood, am I correct?
Correct.
And that was the, what do you call it, coffee can, did you say?
The sample, the swabbings from the coffee can, yes.
And did you perform any confirmatory test on that sample?
No, sir. They were sent on for DNA because of the size of the staining present.
And everything else tested negative?
Correct.
May I have a moment, John?
All right, sure.
There you are.
Okay. You need some help?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Please. Or whoever the designated helper is.
Just that right folder. Okay.
All right. Who's your next witness, please?
Jen Remy.
Okay. Should be sworn, please.
I do.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Would you state your name, please?
Jennifer Remy.
And how are you employed?
I'm a forensic scientist with the North Carolina State Crime Laboratory where I work in the trace evidence section.
And what is the trace evidence section?
The trace evidence section is kind of a catch-all section. We work in a variety of different areas to include hairs, fibers, paints, polymers, arson explosives, and gunshot residue.
And specifically with regard to the hair analysis, can you describe for the jury your training and background in that particular field?
I have an honors Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Delaware, and while I was there I had an internship with the Delaware State Police Crime Laboratory. I then went on to graduate school at the University of Illinois where I earned my master's in forensic science. While I was there I had the opportunity to take a number of different forensic microscopy classes at the McCrone Research Institute, which is one of the world's leading microscopy teaching centers. I was then hired by the State Bureau of Investigation and I underwent the in-house training programs in hair and fiber analysis. During my training and then as continuing education, we go to a variety of different workshops and seminars. I've been back to the McCrone Research Institute as well as to another microscopy teaching center. We've taken classes at a variety of different universities to include North Carolina State University, Bowdoin College in Maine, and the University of Missouri in Rolla. I'm a member of the Southern Association of Forensic Scientists, the American Society of Trace Evidence Examiners. I'm a fellow of the American Board of Criminalistics with a specialty area in hair and fiber analysis. I'm an acting member of SWGMAT, which is the Scientific Working Group for Materials Analysis, which is a group of about 60 experts from across the world that get together to set best practices in forensic science. I'm currently the fiber subgroup chairman, and I also currently teach a class in forensic microscopy at North Carolina State University.
Have you had an opportunity to testify as an expert with regard to fiber and hair analysis?
Yes, I have.
How many times?
Approximately 30.
You know, at this time, the state would tender Agent Remy to the court as an expert in hair and fiber analysis.
The court accepts the tender. Go ahead.
Agent Remy, with regard to the case in which the victim was listed as Laura Ackerson, did you receive certain items of evidence to examine there in the lab?
Yes, I did.
And I've identified the victim. Is that one way that you identify cases that are submitted there in the lab?
By the victim?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And then are they assigned a case number so that every item of evidence that's submitted to the state crime lab can be tracked?
Yes, that's correct. Every case that comes in the door of the laboratory is given a unique laboratory number, and then anytime an officer would bring in additional evidence, it's given that same laboratory number and then an additional item number to specifically identify that particular piece of evidence.
And with regard to this case, can you describe what items that you received?
We renumber them, of course, so you'll have a variety of numbers from our numbers to the police department numbers. It's the laboratory number 10, hair and debris from the bath drain in the tub, which is the police item 57. My item number 27, which are unknown fibers in tape from a black plastic bag, police department number 56. Item number 28, hair from a mushroom weight, police department number 57. Hair from, my item number 29, hair from a gray blanket on top of the hutch, which is police department number 62. Item number 30, which is hair from the interior right wall of the U-Haul trailer, their item number 63. And my item number 31, hair and vegetation from inside the 75-quart cooler, their item 66.
And with regard to receiving those items into the lab, can you describe what process you underwent to test or examine those particular items?
The type of examination I performed in this case was a screen for DNA. Some hairs are suitable for nuclear DNA analysis, and so I was asked to determine if any of the hairs present in any of these items would be suitable for DNA.
And can you describe the process that you go through in determining whether a hair that's submitted into the lab is suitable for DNA?
In order for a hair to be suitable for DNA, we need to examine the root area of the hair. Your hair grows, and it goes through 3 different phases. The first phase is the anagen phase, and that's a phase where your hair is actively growing and it's firmly attached to your head. These aren't hairs that typically fall out by themselves. The final phase is the telogen phase, and that's the phase where the hair is complete, the growing is completed, and a new hair will grow up behind it and push that hair out. Those are the hairs that you routinely find like on your clothes, for instance. And then there's a transition phase between the two called the catagen phase. In order for a hair to be suitable for nuclear DNA analysis, first it has to have a root present. So if the hair is just a fragment or a portion of the hair that doesn't have the root present, that would not be suitable for nuclear DNA. If the hair is in the anagen phase or in the catagen phase, that would mean it would be suitable for nuclear DNA analysis. Typically, telogen phase hairs are not suitable. However, in the occasion where that telogen phase hair falls out and brings a bit of your scalp or the skin with it, there is what we call a follicular tag or a skin tag attached. That hair would then be suitable for nuclear DNA. But just a standard telogen phase hair would not be suitable for nuclear DNA without the presence of that skin tag attached.
And with regard to kind of going through these items that you received one by one, you had indicated that you received fibers and hair from a black bag, and that's previously been identified as being a black bag that was found in Texas underneath a bush. With regard to your findings of that particular item, can you describe that?
Is that my item number 27?
It is.
Okay. When I examined that, I found a piece of blue plastic with black plastic, 2 pieces of black plastic with tape on them. There were 2 fine wavy hairs or fibers noted stuck in the tape. I mounted those, and I determined that they were both animal hairs. And so therefore, we can't perform human DNA testing on animal hairs, so they are not suitable for nuclear DNA testing.
And is that something that, based on your training experience, you're able to distinguish between animal hairs and human hairs?
Yes, that's one of the first phases of our training, is actually to examine microscopically a wide variety of different animal hairs and human hairs and be able to determine the differences between the two.
And you also received your item number 30, which was identified as being the hair from the interior right wall of the U-Haul trailer. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And what did you find with regard to that particular hair that was identified as coming from the U-Haul trailer?
I determined that that was also an animal hair.
And that there was nothing further for the lab to do at that point once it was determined to be animal hairs. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Did you also receive what was represented to be hair and debris from 2 different coolers?
Yes.
And with regard to,
I'm sorry, only one cooler.
okay, with regard to item number 31, was that represented to be hair and vegetation from inside a 75-foot cooler?
Yes, 75 quart cooler, yes.
And what examination did you perform with regard to the hair and vegetation from the cooler?
I looked at that hair. It was a human hair, but it was in a telogen growth phase, and there was no skin tag attached, so it would not be suitable for nuclear DNA testing.
Did you receive what was represented to be hair from a mushroom weight that has previously been identified as being in a boat in Texas?
Yes, I did.
And with regard to the hair from the mushroom weight, what did your analysis reveal?
I found that there were numerous hairs there, but that they were all fragments. So the root area was missing, so therefore not suitable for nuclear DNA analysis.
Did you also receive what was represented to be a hair from the gray blanket on top of the hutch, your item 29?
Yes, I did.
And what analysis did you perform with regard to that hair?
There was one hair present. It was in the telogen growth phase, but it did have a skin tag attached to that one. So in that instance, when there is that skin tag attached, it may be suitable for nuclear DNA analysis. I removed the root. I put it into a small plastic spin tube, and I submitted that for DNA testing.
And is that what you normally do for once you have a root that you can send on? Is that how you process it? That is, remove the root from the hair and send the root on, but not the rest of the hair?
That's correct. The nuclear DNA, the part that makes it suitable for nuclear DNA, the cells with the nucleus, are present only in the root. They are not present in the shaft of the hair, so it's only the root part that needs to go for DNA testing, and then the rest of the hair is preserved.
And were you aware that Agent Hinton was the DNA analyst with regard to this particular case?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And so Agent Danan testified with regard to items that she sent on to Agent Hinton, and then you also had some items that you sent on to Agent Hinton.
Let me look at something. I'm looking at the wrong number. Yes, I just wanted to make sure that I actually handed them to her, and I did. I gave these items directly to Agent Hinton. We can either hand them directly to the analyst that's doing it, or we can turn it back over to an evidence technician who then, when the next analyst is ready, will request it from them. But in this case, I did give them directly to her.
And did you receive your item number 10, what was represented to be hairs from the bathroom drain?
Yes, I did.
And what analysis did you perform with regard to those items?
I examined the hairs from the drain, and I noted that there were some curls. Normally only the tip end is tapered. The root end doesn't normally get that. They were generally Caucasian in appearance, and if they are Caucasian in appearance, hairs that have Caucasian characteristics don't typically have a lot of diameter variation. So the variation in diameter, along with the tapered roots, made it look unusual to me. There were 4 hairs, there were about 65 hairs there, 69, 65 of them were not suitable for nuclear DNA analysis. They were either fragments or they had those telogen roots with no skin tag on them. 4 of the hairs had telogen roots with a skin tag present. So I removed the roots from each of those hairs, placed them in 4 individual tubes, and sent those for DNA testing.
And you've indicated that these hairs that were recovered from the drain that they appeared unusual unusual in appearance, and you've described the variation in the diameter of the hairs and also the tapered ends. You were aware, or they had been identified as coming from a drain area, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And with regard to a drain area, did that give you any concern or give you any information about why there may be variations with regard to the diameter and the tapered ends?
I believe it possibly could be due to the fact that water is running constantly over the hairs, and that it was due to the water erosion, or even simply from cleaning the bathroom, any of the bathroom chemicals that may go down. I don't have any data or anything to back that up. That's just my theory as to how they got to be that way in appearance.
And we've heard testimony about bleach and the reaction that may have, or the effect that may have on DNA or blood evidence. With regard to the chemicals and hair, does that wear down hair, chemicals?
Yes, chemicals can wear down hair.
And you indicated from the drain area you were able to recover of the 69.4 that actually had roots.
Yes, that's correct.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
Agent Remy, I'm handing you what's been marked for identification purposes A180. I believe that's already been admitted into evidence. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
And what is that?
This is my item number 29, which is hair from the gray blanket on top of the hutch.
And is that the item that you removed the root from and sent it on for further analysis with the DNA section?
Yes, I did.
Now, may I approach again?
You may.
This is State's Exhibit 471, which has previously been admitted into evidence. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
And what is State's Exhibit 471?
This is hair and debris from the bath drain.
And is that what you received and removed the roots from the 4 hairs?
Yes, that's correct. This is my item number 10.
And finally, with regard to State's Exhibit 481, do you recognize that item?
I don't recognize this envelope.
Okay, can you open that up and remove? And the items that you removed, are they marked with exhibit stickers?
They are. They're State's Exhibit 481 A, B, C, and D.
And do you recognize State's Exhibits 481 A, B, C, and D?
I do. These are the envelopes that contain the, these are my items 10-1, 10-2, 10-3, and 10-4. These are the roots that I removed from the hairs in item number 10. Or the packaging for the roots. The roots don't exist anymore.
So that packaging at that time containing the roots is what you sent on to Agent Henn for DNA analysis.
That's correct. These envelopes each contained a small plastic tube which they use in their analysis.
Your Honor, at this time, the State would move to introduce into evidence State's Exhibit 481 A, B, C, and D.
So moved, sir.
Your Honor, that's all I have.
Questions?
Yes, very quickly, Your Honor. Good morning, Agent Remy.
Good morning.
By my count, you forwarded on for DNA analysis 4 hairs that were found in the drain of the bathtub, correct?
4, that's correct.
And then there was 1 hair that was found on the hutch in Texas that was forwarded on for DNA analysis, correct?
That was from the blanket that was on top of the hutch. Yes, that's correct.
Have I missed anything?
No, sir.
That's everything that you sent on.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you, ma'am. That's all.
Your Honor, I did have one
All right.
other area.
All right.
Agent Remy, did you also receive a vacuum cleaner to examine in this matter?
Yes, I did.
And what kind of vacuum cleaner did you receive?
I don't know. I didn't open the bag.
All right. Was there some question about examining a vacuum cleaner that had been recovered in this case?
Yes.
And what was discussed with you in terms of what kind of evaluation you could be done with the vacuum cleaner?
I was asked initially to look to see if I could find any hairs that might have belonged to the victim in the vacuum cleaner. However, because it was my understanding and through discussions that the victim had been in the house where the vacuum cleaner was used, her children were regular visitors to the house, it would not be unusual to find her hair in that house, which therefore could be in the vacuum cleaner.
Okay, when you say her children were regularly in the house, is that common for there to be a transfer from the victim to her children that would then be found in the house?
Hair is very easily transferred. When it falls out of your head, it ends up on your clothing, it ends up on the couch. If you have a dog, for example, the dog sits on the couch and then you sit on the couch and you routinely get dog hair on your clothing, it works the same way with hair of family members as well. And so completely inadvertently, the hair would end up on her clothing when you hug your children, or even on their possessions. Their hair may be present, and then they would could be transferred to that home.
And based on kind of what you knew about hair and the transfer of hair and the victims being in that apartment previously as well as their children, did you basically indicate that would not be a fruitful analysis?
That's correct. As a hair analyst, I have no way to tell how long a hair has been there or when it was deposited. All I can tell is that it is there, and because the timing of the event was of importance and when the hair was deposited would have been of importance. Because I can't tell that, then there was no need to examine it for that.
Thank you. That's
All
all.
right.
Just one more thing. Are we talking about the yellow vacuum cleaner or the maroon vacuum cleaner or both?
I only got one vacuum cleaner.
What color was the one you got?
I was given the one from the dumpster. I don't know if that's yellow or green.
That's the yellow one. I think, whatever, you got one.
Yeah, I only got one, and I didn't open the bag that it was in. So.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
All right. Okay, thank you. Thank you all. So you may stand down. Who's your next witness?
Agent Hinton.
Okay. We can start a minute or two, and then anyone want? We'll take a break in about 15 minutes, unless you want to take a break now. Anybody need a break now? Okay. Okay, come on up, Agent Hinton. We'll get you on the stand, get you started, and then we'll take a break in about 15 minutes. And you take your oath, please.
I do.
Could you state your name, please?
Sharon Hinton.
And how are you employed?
I am a forensic scientist with North Carolina State Crime Laboratory as a DNA analyst.
And how long have you been employed with the North Carolina State Crime Lab as a DNA analyst?
Over 10 years now.
And can you describe your background, your training experience that allows you to perform your jobs as a DNA analyst?
Yes, I have a Bachelor of Science degree in biology from North Carolina Central University and a Master's in Science and Biology from Texas Southern University. And I've taken graduate classes at Ohio University in biostatistics and biochemistry and in statistics. And I've worked previously at a private laboratory doing DNA analysis in Louisiana for about 2.5 years before coming to the State Crime Lab. At each place you go through in-house DNA training, and you need to go through competency and proficiency testing that you have to pass with 100% accuracy before you can start your individual casework.
And we've used the term DNA. Can you explain to the jury what is DNA?
Sure. DNA is basically your genetic blueprint. It makes up your physical aspects, whereas your daily bodily functions. Basically, 99.9% of everyone's DNA is the same. 0.1% of a person's DNA is different. That makes them unique. And you inherit this from your mother. So you get half from your mother and half from your father. And your DNA will stay consistent throughout your lifetime. And it's that 0.1% that we use to develop a person's unique DNA profile when we make comparisons and evidence to any known samples that are presented in a case. And we will make comparisons for matches or exclusions and make reports to that effect.
And where in a person's body is DNA found?
In all of your nucleated cells, so it would be in your hair, in the white blood cells of your blood, the saliva, skin cells, semen, just about most of your cells in your body.
And would that include your skin cells as well?
Correct.
And with regard to bodily fluids, you've indicated that would include blood. Would that also include saliva? And I believe you mentioned semen.
Correct.
And with regard to DNA in the various parts of your body, is the DNA for an individual, is it the same whether it comes from your blood or whether it comes from your saliva or your skin?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you're not able to look at a particular sample of DNA and tell what part of the body that DNA came from?
No.
As a DNA analyst with the State Crime Lab, can you explain what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. When the evidence comes in, the body fluid will be on some sort of substrate, be on a cotton swab or on a piece of material. So our purpose is basically to remove the DNA from the skin cells or from whatever cell it may be. When the DNA is released into a solution, we need to know how much DNA we have to work with. Once we have quantitated how much we have, we need to basically amplify that 0.1% that makes that person unique. And when we have that, we need to run it on an electrophoresis machine that will separate it by size and charge. And it basically makes a graph. And with that graph, we will use it to make comparisons between the evidence in the case and the known samples in the case. And depending on whether or not how much of the DNA that you may have, the DNA may be degraded for numerous reasons, or you may just not have enough of the DNA cells to make any comparisons. But based on whatever you have, you'll try to make comparisons between that, evidence samples, and any known samples in your cases.
And in terms of making those comparisons, do you sometimes are you able to make a match between a question sample and a particular known sample of DNA?
You do, and when you are able to make matches, you will do statistics, and which basically will tell you how common that person's DNA profile is in the general population of North Carolina, and we'll write that into a report and testify.
And are there times when you're able to say it's not a match? In other words, this question sample does not match with the known sample?
Yes, if there are 16 locations that we test for, and you need to have the majority of those to match. If they do not match, then if the person's DNA is just totally different from what you have on your evidence items, then you would say that sample does not match. And if you do have matches in that case, or you would make your statistics on that, or you could have a situation where there's not enough of the DNA on the evidence items for you to conclusively say that this DNA came from this person, then in the report you would say that no conclusions were drawn.
Is it sometimes possible to exclude a person based on what you find? Exclude a known sample, but maybe not make a match or say it's not that person?
Yes, if it's not a match at all, then you would exclude the person and report out that way.
And at times when you have submitted to you various items of evidence from which swabbings have been taken or cuttings have been taken, do you get what appears to you to be a mixture of more than one person's DNA?
You can, depending on where the items was taken from, you can actually have more than one person's DNA on a piece of item. So we report that out as a mixture. And you can have more than one person's DNA on an item, basically meaning that, say if you have marbles in a bucket, and if you have a bucket of blue marbles and you have a few red marbles thrown in there, you predominantly have mostly a bucket of blue marbles. And the minor, or your minor profile, would be a few of the red marbles. And based on the person's profile, you may be able to say, yes, these blue marbles match this person, these red marbles, I'm not too sure where they come from, so I'm inconclusive. Or if you have enough, you can say that it is a match to the other person.
And have you, Agent Hinton, had the opportunity to testify in court as an expert regarding your findings related to evidence that comes in and that's unknown and comparing it to a known DNA profile?
I have
And how many times have you done that?
approximately 60 times.
At this time, I would submit Agent Hinton to the court as an expert in DNA analysis.
Court accepts the tender.
Agent Hinton, with regard to this particular case that you've been called to here, did you perform DNA analysis with regard to certain items that were submitted to you there in the lab?
I did.
And specifically, did you receive some items in September of 2011?
The items were submitted to the laboratory in September 2011, but I did not receive them in September.
When did you first receive any items in this case?
I received the first items in April 2013.
And do you recall receiving DNA swabbings that were identified as having been recovered from the victim's car in this case? 3 DNA swabbings?
Correct, yes.
And what other items did you receive when you received those items?
The 3 swabbings that were coming from the vehicle. I received a cutting from a towel, a 3M disposable respirator, 4 latex gloves and a 3M disposable respirator, a yellow dish gloves, swabs from a linen closet door frame.
Were those all questioned items of evidence that have been collected from various locations?
Correct.
And were you also submitted known DNA swabbings?
I was.
And from whom did you receive known DNA swabbings, or who were they identified as coming from?
I received DNA saliva swabs from Grant Hayes and DNA saliva swabs from Amanda Hayes.
And did you also receive a bone that was identified as being from the remains of Laura Ackerson?
I did.
Is that something that, as a DNA analyst, you're able to obtain a DNA profile, that being the bone?
Correct, I am.
And once you have received the known samples from the swabbings from Grant Hayes and Amanda Hayes, and then the bone from Laura Ackerson, can you describe for the jury what you did with those items?
Once the DNA, like you said, you'd isolate it into the little plastic tubes. You need to extract the DNA out of whatever item it may be on. You'll use different ways to actually get to the DNA. Like for the bone, I had to go through a different process before I could actually get to the cells. But basically, you have your DNA, you release it into the solution, and then you need to find out how much you have and amplify that 0.1% of the person, and then you do your comparisons with the graph as to the evidence samples and any known samples that you have in the case.
And with regard to kind of the process that you went through related to the items of evidence that you were submitted, did you go through that same process to try to extract any DNA?
Correct.
And after going through that process, were you then able to make a comparison with regard to the items that you were able to get a profile from?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. In terms of these specific items of evidence, were you able to get a profile from each one of these items?
No, I was not able to get a DNA profile off of every item that was submitted to me.
And why is that you sometimes are not able to get a DNA profile?
Sometimes the sample itself could be damaged or may not be enough of the actual DNA there to get a DNA profile. Sometimes there are inhibitors that will inhibit the actual amplification of the DNA. You may be able to isolate DNA, but actually the amplification at 0.1%, something may be in the solution that you couldn't extract out of the solution when you're trying to purify it, that actually is inhibiting it for amplifying. Or the actual DNA itself just could be damaged through the environment or chemicals or something like that could damage the DNA.
And there's been some testimony about particular items given positive indications for blood and not a confirmatory test being done, but it's been sent on to you for DNA analysis. Why is that the way the lab does it? That is, to send it to you for DNA analysis as opposed to do any kind of confirmatory test?
If the sample may be too small, you end up using more of the sample. Each test that you do, you're using more and more of your evidence item. So if your sample is small, you don't want to waste it on doing serology testing on it when you could find out exactly who this item could belong to or find out whose DNA is on an item. So you send it on to DNA where we actually, the kits that we use are actually human specific. So if it's not human, then it would not amplify. So that's one reason why they wouldn't do a human testing on something in serology if they don't have very much of it. They would just send it on to me knowing that it will amplify if it is human, and then we'll be able to get a profile from it.
Tell you what, it's 11:15. Won't we stop for about 15 minutes? Folks, we're going to take the morning break. Don't obviously follow my previous instructions. Don't form or express any opinion about the guilt or innocence of the defendant or any matter in controversy. Keep an open mind. We'll see everybody back in about 15 minutes. Leave your notes in your chair. You're excused for about 15 minutes. Thank you. All right, the juror is absent and will be in recess for about 15 minutes. Thank you. Agent, you can stand down if you like. Thank you.